Before I start this video, I just want to say that this video will contain sensitive themes, so be aware of that. With that in mind, let's get into the video. Today's video is going to be about Doma / Welpgobye. They've gone by a lot of names in the past, but I'm going to be using only Doma for simplicity's sake. For those who aren't familiar with Doma, Doma is a 16-year-old artist who makes a lot of frame-by-frame animations and is pretty popular on TikTok and YouTube. They're most popular for Dandy's World animations right now. And if you're in the Dandy's World fandom or Roblox fandom at all, you've probably seen their animations around. For those who have seen posts with Doma's art, you've probably noticed that in the comments, they're usually talking about how problematic the creator is, or that they're sad that this creator turned out to be problematic. You may also realize that these comments saying that they're problematic are often extremely vague or fail to give proper sources for these allegations. This has led to a lot of accusations becoming misconstrued or just lacking full context, like Doma's age and the people that were surrounding her at the time. And the accusations against her have been very serious, like accusations of being a Nazi, accusations of being a necrophile, etc. And with such serious allegations, this has resulted in multiple harassment campaigns against Doma and the people that support Doma. It's also resulted in people leaking personal art and claiming that she has multiple different fetishes and people sexualizing her completely innocent videos. Keep in mind, this person is 16. And I've talked about the issue with these harassment campaigns where they start sexualizing everything the person does in order to humiliate them. Most often, this is done through saying that this person has a kink of something very obscure, like, for example, claiming that someone has a fat fetish just because they draw fat people. In Doma's case, it's Dandy's World characters turning into furries. These videos were allegedly leaked and not supposed to be public, so I will not be showing them, but in the comments section of all of these leaked animations, it's people claiming that Doma has a fetish for this and sexualizing this 16-year-old, which is absolutely disgusting. And the people reposting her art don't really get backlash because Doma is seen as an irredeemable person for allegations that don't really make sense or lack context. And with all of that in mind, let's get into the allegations that have caused all of this harassment. So for this section, I'm not going to show screenshots because this was something that happened when Doma was 11, and the people that originally made these accusations have came forward and said that this wasn't grooming or anything like this, but I'm only mentioning it at the start because I still occasionally see people bring this accusation up without any context to Doma's age or anything. This accusation basically stems from Doma being in a relationship with someone when they were 11 and the person was 10 years old, and it was like an unhealthy relationship because 11 and 10-year-olds can't really have a healthy relationship. It's gonna be messy. The people who originally made these accusations have came forward and said that this is not the case, it wasn't grooming or anything like that. I just thought I'd quickly mention it because occasionally I do see people bring it up. If you're really curious on more context on the situation, I have linked 2 videos in the description kind of explaining from the perspective of the person who originally made these allegations against Doma. This person's completely aware that these allegations were not right to make and have grown from it because it was a few years ago when they first made these allegations and they were very young. Since then, they've made efforts to clear up any misinformation around Doma that they have spread. But yeah, I thought I would quickly mention that because this allegation is still occasionally brought up by people. But yeah, now I'm going to get on to the allegations that Doma is most often criticized for and the ones that aren't really cleared up as well. And the allegations that I'll be going over are the ones in the most recent document made against them, which have been the same allegations that have been against them for years. So let's get into it. Firstly, I'm going to start off with the Nazism accusations. These accusations stem from Doma having a Nazi OC from 2022 to 2023. Doma would have been around 13 to 14 during these time periods. They were also making a lot of jokes about Nazism around this time. To me, it comes across that they were drawing these Nazi uniforms and Nazi OCs as a way to sort of rage bait people. And I do have a problem with people using sensitive subjects to rage bait people, because that's often how real Nazis hide in these groups, saying, oh, I'm just rage baiting. But personally, I don't think that Doma is an actual Nazi, considering they were only 13 to 14 whilst making these arts and jokes. I just think they probably got into the wrong type of friendship group and ended up being influenced by them. Unfortunately, the document doesn't include much information about the people that were surrounding Doma. Rather, they just focus on what Doma was saying. But I kind of speculate that the people around them were probably making the same jokes and probably influenced Doma to do the same. Doma has actually addressed this, and they say that the reason why they made art with Nazi uniforms in is because they enjoyed the way they looked. This suggests that when Doma was first exposed to Nazi uniforms, they probably were not taught about the seriousness behind them, which makes sense why they would feel comfortable making jokes about it at the time. They've since apologized for this, and I personally think that they should be allowed to move on from this, considering they were only 13 to 14 during this. You don't personally have to forgive them, but you shouldn't continuously harass them or something that they've apologized and tried to change. From 2021 to 2024, Doma would make multiple racist jokes and say the N-word. Most of the screenshots provided are from 2021 to 2023, but from what I'm gathering from the document, this behavior was from the ages of 13 to 15. Doma has apologized and said they were peer pressured by their black friends to make these jokes, which personally to me doesn't really make much sense. I'm assuming it was some sort of, oh yeah, I gave you the pass sort of joke. However, Doma would allegedly make multiple racist jokes, which spanned outside of saying the N-word. And because Doma said that they were in groups that would encourage bad behavior like this, I'm assuming it was the case for these jokes as well. Of course, that doesn't exactly excuse it. However, with some nuance, you can kind of understand that a 13 to 15-year-old can be easily influenced by the people around them, and that their jokes probably come from a place of trying to appease their friends and fit in rather than any actual hate towards these minority groups. It still doesn't make it okay though, because it kind of makes a space where actual people who have hateful beliefs can hide in these spaces, but I can kind of understand how Doma could have gotten into this situation where they were making these jokes. It takes meeting one bad person and then suddenly you're surrounded by people who make these sort of jokes. I understand where Doma's coming from, and I hope that they don't make this mistake again. Doma has a history of making jokes about non-con/rape. It seems they've been doing this since they were 14, and continue to do this up to present time. Now, allegedly, Doma can't reclaim these jokes, and I'm definitely not comfortable speculating if Doma has went through that sort of trauma. However, it is public information that Doma has been exposed to not the best individuals or groups, and that they went through a lot of sexual harassment when they were younger from people online who would trace their art and make it not safe for work. And whilst they have no idea if this harassment influenced Doma to make these jokes, it does show us that Doma has been exposed to maybe not the best type of people. Doma has addressed this and says that their friendship group at the time would make jokes about rape. These jokes were made in private with people that they thought they could trust. And when the screenshots of Doma saying these things were posted, all of the people that would make these jokes and encourage them were cropped out. It was solely focused on Doma. And in my opinion, it just seems like people are focusing on Doma just because they're a more popular artist, which isn't exactly fair. Now, my personal stance on rape jokes is that I would prefer if people who didn't go through that trauma didn't make those jokes, and even then, I think that people should keep these jokes private, which they were. They just got leaked. Which is honestly really unfair towards Doma, especially since all of the context to these jokes has been removed, and so any random person looking at these screenshots can't really tell the context or intention behind what Doma is saying. Instead, these screenshots are framed in a way where it kind of makes Doma seem like someone who's extremely insensitive and doesn't care about rape, when we don't know the context of these jokes, and it's not our place to speculate either. Doma has been accused of drawing CP in the past. Now, for pretty obvious reasons, I'm not going to show this art, but what I will say is that the only evidence of this being CP is Doma's ex-girlfriend claiming that this art is CP, which isn't exactly evidence. There is a drawing of the character being drawn as a baby, but honestly, the character doesn't exactly look the same as the character that's in the Not Safe for Work. They have completely different body types, and I know I can't show you this because it's personal, but if you've seen the document and you kind of pay attention, you probably notice that the characters don't look the same. There's some similarities, but maybe it's a different version of the same character. And whilst I genuinely agree that aging up a character isn't an excuse to sexualize a character, Doma would have been 14 at the time, and so they wouldn't have been able to understand the complexities of that. And I think a better way to go about this, if Doma's intention truly was to sexualize a minor character, would to be to explain to them privately why this could be harmful. I feel as if that would have been a lot more productive approach, because not only are you leaking minors not safe for work art, you're also putting them at risk, because now predators can see that this minor is vulnerable and a lot of people are harassing them over this thing that they haven't really been properly sat down and explained to why it's wrong. And if you think, well, they've been publicly shamed, so clearly they know it's wrong. Unfortunately, that's not how children's minds work. If children see a bunch of people saying how gross and disgusting they are, a lot of the time they'll just shut down and not be able to take in any criticism. But to sum up the CP allegations against Doma, I personally think the way it's being handled is very unproductive and harmful. Considering their age at the time of when this stuff took place, I feel like this should be more of a concern for Doma rather than harassment. I just want to quickly say, Doma has also joked about CP during the same ages that I mentioned before, and my stance is the same as the one I mentioned with the rape jokes, and that is, if Doma's making jokes about that sort of thing, and they've been exposed to sexual content in general at a young age, which they've confirmed now that they have, I honestly see it as more of a way of making light of the way they feel about it, because being exposed to that sort of thing at a young age really does change your mindset. And because Doma's making these jokes privately, I personally have zero issue with them making these jokes. I think really the people who publicize these jokes are more in the wrong than Doma, because they're leaking private jokes without the full context of the people Doma is around or the things Doma has been through, and villainizing them when that really should just not be the case. Doma has been accused of harassing a 15-year-old whilst they were also 15. Allegedly, this harassment took place through Doma making a OC based on this person and then sexualizing this OC. Now, there's two conflicting things about this. These two conflicting things being, Doma claims that this person that they are harassing is 18 and has done some pretty bad stuff, whilst the other side claims that this person is 15. Now, neither side has provided evidence to this person's age, nor have they really explained who this person is and their relation to Doma. So it's really confusing trying to fully gauge the situation. But what I will say, no matter someone's age and what they've done, you really don't want to stoop to that level and draw sexualized art of them if this is actually an OC that represents someone. Because even if they've wronged you, it does count as sexual harassment, and whilst this did happen while Doma was 14 or 15, it's still morally wrong, and you shouldn't ever stoop to someone's level in those sort of situations. Of course, I don't have the full context of this at all, due to both sides being pretty vague about what happened, so that's all I've got to say for this situation. On to the next allegation. I'm going to quickly mention this, and I feel like my opinions are going to be very similar to what I said with the CP allegations against Doma, and that's because it was the same sort of situation where Doma was young and being influenced by other people. From my understanding, these allegations stem from when Doma was 11 to 14, and what constitutes these allegations is basically Doma drew anthro characters with feral genitals, which would be considered zoophilic. However, they were only young when this happened, and I can understand why a younger person wouldn't really understand why that's wrong. Doma has since realized that this is wrong, and that's what really matters. I think it's completely unnecessary to continuously leak that old not safe for work art from when they were 11 to 14, because they've moved on from this, from what I can understand. The second thing that I wanted to mention is the necrophilia allegations against Doma. These are also old and from when Doma was 11 to 14. And Doma does admit that they were being influenced by someone who thinking that this was okay. I realize that I'm explaining this pretty vaguely, but Doma themselves never condoned like IRL necrophilia, and only ever drew characters that were necrophiles, if that makes sense. They did also make jokes about necrophilia, but honestly, there's a lack of context with all of the jokes that are put on the doc. For example, here it says that Doma is threatening one of their friends in various necrophilic ways, but it's very cropped, and this could have been just them joking around and then they've fallen out and they're not friends anymore, so the context is cropped. With this sort of thing, you need to show the whole conversation. Otherwise, it's gonna make people who are looking into this situation think, wow, do you have something to hide? Are you not being honest with the full context of the situation? I know to some people it might seem like I'm excusing Doma's behavior, but for a lot of the things that Doma's being accused of, there's a vital context missing, like Doma's age, and also the fact that these screenshots have no context. So I'm just being wary. On to the next segment. I think this section is where I'm going to be the most critical of Doma. So essentially, Doma spread around someone's docs. Doma themselves did not look for this person's docs, allegedly, but they did spread this person's docs around and joke about their docs, which simply isn't okay, even if they were 14 or 15 at the time. With some of the people that Doma docs, some of them are Doma's friends nowadays and have forgiven them, but some have chosen not to, and I think that's really valid and that's okay. With a situation like this, there's not much you can do apart from really just not repeat that behavior again. Of course, it was wrong that Doma did dox people, but all they can really do is just not repeat that behavior and apologize to the people that they did hurt. From what I understand, Doma is trying to distance himself from communities that enabled toxic behaviors like doxing, and especially those communities that influence them into bad mindsets and being problematic overall. I personally do not think Doma is irredeemable. However, they are very much approaching an age where doing stuff like this really cannot be excused anymore, and so I hope that their recovery continues and they don't fall back into old habits or anything like that. You may have noticed that I didn't mention some things in the document. Some of the things that were included in the document were really not necessary. For example, the document goes into detail about Doma's fetishes, which is a huge no from me. I don't think it's appropriate to bring up a minor's fetishes in public, especially if they're not trying to push that fetish onto a younger person or they're endangering anyone. I also feel like the document brings up these fetishes in a way where it's in a way to humiliate Doma, and it just makes me so uncomfortable, and so I'm not getting into that. There's also a segment on Doma affiliating with problematic people, but I don't personally agree with people being guilty if they associate with someone, especially when they're a child, just because you can be very easily influenced and misled as a child. So we've reached the end of the video. To conclude this video, I want to say that people really need to stop posting Doma's not safe for work in public. It's really not good. I don't know why it's normalized. If you don't want to forgive Doma, that's fine. You don't have to see their content, you can just block them. I personally don't think Doma's too far gone, but if they do continuously relapse into this behavior and they get older doing this, it's it crosses a line at some point. However, from what I can see, Doma has mostly not repeated their behavior that they've been called out for, especially some of the earlier stuff like the Nazism stuff. But I think that concludes my video. Thank you for watching. Bye!